And we're live! Greetings, Scribblers. Kent Sean here, and today I have some very special guests for you. The winners and judges of the prize-pursuing, emotion-evoking, drama-demolishing, simile-scrambling, sinfully scintillating, awkwardly alliterating, trope-torpedoing, terribly titled short story competition of Doom.
Yay!
We also have the winners of last year's short story competition, Bethany Votaw and Colin Clark, who were guest judges this time around. Say hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Very good, Colin.
Hello.
All right, what I'm going to do right now is give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, tell us what they're all about. Let's go around the horn, and let's start with Colin Clark. Who are you? The man, the myth.
I'm Colin Clark. I once won a story competition with the title I can't pronounce. Sorry, came second in the story competition. I'm a writer, fantasy writer, and I do stuff. Look at my website, authorcolinclark.com. Take a look on there, you see some stuff I write. Currently, I'm writing an episodic thingy-jiggy and also a middle grade novel. So, yeah, I'm fine. I've been sat here talking to Kent for the last hour, and I've now drunk. I'm on my second bottle of wine, so personally, I'm as pissed apart. I don't care. Yeah, and let's go to Bethany.
Bethany Votaw, who are you? What are you up to?
Hi, I am Bethany Votaw, and I have a short story collection out, Scribbles and Scrawls. Go ahead and check that out. It's pretty cool, if I do say so myself. But I am releasing a prequel, hopefully in October, for my newsletter subscribers. So go ahead and sign up for that at bethanyjvotaw.com. And Tracker, the long-awaited thriller that I have talked about forever, which has been done forever, I've just been too chicken to hit publish, is going to be published in November. So you can all look forward to that. Yeah.
You okay with Shrek fetish?
And the late, but amazing Jasmine, please tell us about yourself, who you are, what have you got going on?
All right. My name is Jasmine Drayton. You said talk about the story, correct?
Just talk about yourself first. We're going to do stories next.
Myself. Okay, I didn't quite hear you, so I just wanted to double check. I was like, oh, that's a little soon. Okay. I am an Authortuber, like the rest of you, I suppose. I do a lot of videos on Wednesdays, and I like to do the Read Day Booktube things on Thursdays. So I've been on Authortube for about a year. I talk a lot about writing my trilogy that has taken forever, and that pretty much sums it up as far as what I do on my channel.
Awesome. Okay, Chris, your turn, buddy. Tell us what you're up to.
Hi there. So I'm Chris Hewitt, and I have Kent, not Kent, the other Kent in England. Yeah, I've been writing for a couple of years, and last month I've launched my first novella with a publisher called Erie River Publishing. Amongst several other anthologies that I've produced over the years. So yeah, and you can find out all of my stories and going on mused.blog for what I'm up to and what I'm doing.
Good.
Sako Tumi, I finally get to talk to you. I feel like I've known you for years, but it's the first time we've got to talk in person. I can't wait to hear all about you. Tell me, what's up?
Howdy neighbors, I'm Sako Tumi, also known as Cass Voight. I write horror, and I'm a witch, and I'm a graphic designer, and sometimes I combine those three things. So if you are interested in videos that pertain to marketing for authors, I have a whole playlist of them on my channel, Sako Tumi, Cass Voight. Drop by sometime, I would love to see you. Last year, in summer, I published my debut novel, Hope's Chest. My story actually uses the same protagonist. And this year in October, I'm hoping to publish my second novel, Flambeau, which I co-wrote with BC Brown. We are working on the third draft. We are hoping to hurry up and do that.
Co-writing. See, that's something I really want to get into. How was that experience?
That's the
It's brilliant, and I love it, and it's everything I hoped it would be.
Yeah.
May have to question you more on that later. Interrogate you more, as it were. All right. All right. Well, I'm Kent Sean. Everybody knows who I am, the guy in the flannel. But anyway, so I've got several books out. You can go check me out at kentshawn.com. I'm writing a urban fantasy series called the Millennium Tower series right now. The third book is going to come out in November, and I should finish the series off by March of next year. Check it out if you want. If not, go check out my short story horror compilation called Evil Grows in the Dark. All right, that's it about me. Now what I want to talk about are the amazing winners of the short story competition of Doom. We had 3 very different stories come out in the top 3 positions this year. And, you know, we really get an eclectic collection because this short story competition does not have any rules other than a word count. You can send us anything you want. In last year's competition, I actually got a kid's picture book. So we get every kind of story you can imagine, which makes the judging a little bit of a challenge because it's hard. Sometimes you're not just comparing apples to oranges, you're comparing apples to planets, and it sometimes does not mix. So the way we did is I came up with a comprehensive score sheet which score the attributes of the story in and of themselves. So even if you wrote a fluffy little love story compared to a dark and sinister work of awfulness, which is my personal favorite kind of thing, that you got a chance to be compared favorably against stories that are completely different from yours. Now, Jasmine, I know you got to leave early, so I think we're going to start talking about your story called Surfacing.
Sounds
Jasmine.
good. Awesome.
Jasmine wrote a dystopian nightmare of a story involving 2 characters, one of which had a very unusual name, Vixen. I read Vixen and I'm like, I'm thinking femme fatale, and 2 sentences later I realized that is not the case. Jasmine, tell us how you came up with your idea for Surfacing and a little bit about your story.
So I have no recollection of starting this story because it was actually something that I found on my Wattpad account when I was 15, 16 years old. So I was planning on doing a video just kind of looking through my Wattpad stories and ranking them from worst to best. And I was reading through the first chapter of this one story that was never published, did not get anywhere past the prologue. And I knew that the prologue, they were kind of supposed to be side characters. You know how in the beginning of the movie, like a lot of action movies, they throw in these 2 really random characters to kind of like introduce the plot, and then you introduce the main character. So I think that's what I was going for initially. I have no idea what I was going to do with it, just completely mind blank. But I was reading it and I really enjoyed it. The reason I changed the name, so initially Vixen's name was not Vixen, it was Randall, and I hated it. But I did think it was important to give this character a very strange name because he was definitely the one that was more interesting. He was weird. Like, I wanted to make 2 very distinctly different main characters. One that was kind of just like super boring. His name is Stanley, and he's very much like I follow the rules kind of guy. And then there's Vixen over here that's like, I'm smarter than everyone else, so I'm going to figure this out on my own. And I really liked the way that they kind of bounced off of each other. So that was the reason I gave him such a strange name, is because I wanted to give the persona of him not being so normal versus Stanley, who's very just like traditional type of man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's how it all got started.
So have you always been into the kind of the dystopian genre, or was this a first for you?
It is a favorite. So the trilogy that I am working on is also kind of a dystopian, definitely apocalypse type of theme. There's just so much you can do with it. I feel like sky's the limit. So I have done it before. I haven't done it in this way before where it's nuclear warfare. So that was new.
Okay. So we start off with a simple conversation between 2 fellas. We don't really know where we are. We don't really know what's going on. And I thought that was kind of a gutsy way to open the story with dialogue. It's one of my favorite ways to do it. Is that a choice you usually make when you're writing short fiction, to just jump in media res right into the action?
Yeah, I jump into the action a lot of the time, and a lot of my stories I've been told are dialogue heavy, which can be a good and bad thing. So I'm trying to work out the balance. But but yeah, so usually jump right in, and I enjoy how much interaction you can get with dialogue.
Okay. Without giving away, see, this is always the interesting part, because your stories have only been up for about a week and they're already getting reads. So it's very difficult to know like how much I want to
Explain.
I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. Give away what happens in your story. But if you could give us just a brief overview of kind of the problem that these two gentlemen find themselves in.
All right. So the basic plot is that there are the two main characters. They're currently inside of a space where they're working their day job, kind of keeping track of seeing what is going on the surface of Earth, because Earth has been unlivable for hundreds of years. So they're looking for any sign of life. And they receive a signal that is saying SOS, which they take as, hey, there's something up there. But when they go to the control panel to see if any of the other, I guess, underground communities have heard anything, they realize they haven't had contact with any of these communities unknowingly for about 100 years. So really, they're the only two people that know, A, there's something up there, and B, something's going wrong with the communication with all of the underground communities. So this is their journey back up to the surface, which has been said to be very dangerous thanks to radioactivity and, all sorts of unknown tunnels and natural disaster dangers. And it's their journey to the surface, which is why it's called surfacing.
So that opens like 50 cans of worms all at once. So first of all, when I first started reading it, I was thinking about the community underground. Like they didn't know they were out of contact with everybody else. It's almost as if, I liked her comment, sounds like they were buried alive. It sounded like, in a way, that they had just become used to living in a tomb, and they almost didn't expect contact, and that the new normal for them was just to sit in silence and wait for a day that they don't know will ever come, when they could potentially leave where they were. And I thought that kind of came out in the dialogue between the two guys, that they had kind of just accepted their fate down there. Was that intentional?
I think especially for one of the characters, yes, because like I said, I wanted there to be a very distinct difference, so that they kind of had, they kind of used different characteristics to their advantage to bounce off of each other. So one character definitely is like, well, maybe it's just better down here, like it's very dangerous up on the surface. We might as well just stay. Where the other character was more, more curious and wanted to achieve this dream of going back. So there definitely was, after hundreds of years, you kind of get used to it being your new normal, if that's all you knew, because all things considered, these characters are probably in their 20s or 30s, so their entire life has been underground, so they probably didn't know anything different.
I'm getting tired of that phrase, new normal, whenever it means us locked in our houses or wearing masks, but that's okay.
Yep.
But another thing I wanted to bring out about your story, Jasmine, is something I'm always preaching to everybody, is to progressively complicate the action in your scenes and acts and stories. In other words, whatever problem is placed in front of people, it needs to get worse and worse and worse, and bring them to a point where they have to make a really hard choice. You definitely accomplished that in your story, and without giving away why, there was a series of mishaps with the equipment that keeps everybody alive down below, which gets worse and worse to a point where the characters literally have to make a life and death choice. Is this something you consciously think about before you create the story, or does you try to let it happen organically as you're writing?
That's a really good question. That's I have to kind of think in the back of my mind about what my process is, because usually I know where I want the characters to end up or the plot to end up, but I have to figure out how to get there. So I guess the answer to your question is I have an idea of where I want to take it, and I just kind of fill in the blanks as I go. So I usually write the beginning of the story and end of the story first, and then I work on the middle, because that takes the most time. And I think that as long as I know where I'm going, then I'll be able to avoid plot holes. There was a lot of stuff in this story that I didn't previously know, kind of how like equipment worked or technicalities worked. So I had to do quite a bit of research to see if any of it was realistic, which I'm sure I fudged, a little bit of realism in some parts, but I did some research to figure some things out, which was very interesting and very fun.
Yeah, see, I feel your pain because I like to make everything up. And unfortunately, I wrote a book that has FBI agents in it, and an FBI agent read it. So I got a series of very technical emails in which he explained to me in nauseating detail how wrong I was.
Actually, yeah,
about how
there you
federal
go.
task forces are put together, which I tried to correct in the next book. So I wrote a prequel shortly thereafter and used his advice to make it make more sense. So Dan, if you're out there, thanks, buddy. Yeah, generally speaking, research to me is a dirty word. So I'll write a manuscript and I'll just put in parentheses RE, meaning I probably need to figure out what the hell this is and how it works at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually save it for like one of the last drafts, which is probably not a good idea. Judges, do you have any questions for Jasmine?
No.
No pressure.
Yes, I have one. I love that you pulled this from your old Wattpad account, like when you were like 16. And I don't know how old you are, but like years later, how much editing did you have to do to make this something that you were like, okay, I can submit this? Was it pretty clean and minimal, or did you just like take the idea and totally like rewrite it? Because I love the idea of a Plato's Cave type thing, which this is very much that. So I'm just curious what your editing process was like.
So luckily, there wasn't a lot written in my Wattpad initially. So if you look at kind of like the full, manuscript of what my story was, the only part that I had written in Wattpad was like the very, very beginning dialogue. So all of that string of dialogue at the very beginning of the story, that was all I had written. And so I did some minor tweaks, like I changed the name, obviously made it a little less cheesy as far as dialogue goes, because it's hard to not make dialogue cheesy sometimes, especially when you're a 16-year-old girl. So I switched that, but yeah, everything else was brand new material that I kind of bounced off of the beginning of that. So it was nice that I didn't have it completely written out, so I didn't have to just like really go in and edit a whole bunch of stuff. So it was half and half.
That's so fun. I love hearing how ideas evolve over the years. That's so interesting.
I have so many different ideas in the back of my head where I'm like, that's a good idea. I didn't write it very well when I was younger. So that's why I keep my Wattpad open, is just for like in the back of my mind, I can think of those stories and go back and write them better.
I loved Jasmine. I loved the dialogue between the two of them as they're traveling upwards. That struck so real to me, and that's why I loved it, because it was so natural. That you've got one coward and one coward, but he's slightly more brave than the other coward. But it broke my heart at one point. But read the story, folks, if you want to know why it breaks your heart. But it's just the dialogue was so realistic. It was two friends, people who loved each other going upwards, and somebody wanted to, somebody didn't, and it just struck me as so real, and I loved it.
Well, thank you.
It just made it for me. It's a great story. Everybody should be going on Kent's site now and reading it.
Well, you mean as soon as they finish listening to this awesome interview that we're doing right now?
Not now.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go to Sako next. Unless Jasmine, if you have any parting comments about surfacing that you want to tell anyone?
It's on Ken's website. So called Surfacing. There it is. And
read it.
Thank you.
Dialogue, superb.
Fun dialogue.
All right.
Yeah.
Sako Tumi, this is your second time in the short story contest of Doom, and I loved your story last time around. It didn't do as well as this story. One judge didn't like it. It was a very weird situation.
Understand.
So this work, each judge turns in a scoring sheet and you tally them all up. So, and there were more judges. Well, if one judge didn't like you in the last contest because of the 5 sheets, you had no chance. And she had one judge not like her story. And I thought it was an incredibly original story about a gentleman with occult powers who is also kind of like a mafia leader figure who had to knock some sense into a recalcitrant young man. I thought the way you described the magic was really incredible, and I really looked forward to your entry this year. Tell us a little bit about Panda.
Panda is a Vietnamese American white hat in Washington, D.C. White hat is someone who hacks into security systems in order to reveal problems and for the benefit of mankind, as opposed to to screw up everybody's time. So she is a mage who uses technology in her magic.
Okay, so I understand this character is part of a longer story, but this is just one focused little incident, and it seems like this character is having a pretty interesting life because there's all kinds of magical and occult figures and creatures that populate the world that you created. And she walks into a very unusual party. Can you kind of describe the problem that she faces in this party?
So it's a Halloween party in her neighborhood, and her neighborhood is called State Department land in this area. It's where CIA and FBI and State Department tend to live, $1 million houses and whatnot. And so she doesn't talk to her neighbors, and she finally decides, okay, I'm going to talk to my neighbors. It's like, I'm being invited to a Halloween party. I might as well go. She attempts to order a costume, but it doesn't come in time. So she's like, whatever, I'll just go. And it turns out that the hosts of the party are vampires, pretending to be human, pretending to be vampires. So she's like, oh crap, they took my keys, and because they expect me to get drunk, and I'm kind of not into this scenery. So she tries to escape. She tries to get her keys back and get out of there. She attempts to use her magic, but the house is completely anachronistic. So it's completely off the grid. There's no electronics or electricity in the house. So she has to basically count on her wits in order to get out, rather than banking on her magic.
That was a particularly interesting point. Now, there's 2 things that I want to drag out of that. First of all, your story was probably the most character-driven of all the ones in the competition. This was really about who Panda was as much as the difficult situation in which she found herself. In fact, you kind of got the feeling from reading about Panda that she might have been in some spots like this a couple times before. Mm-hmm. She had a lot of courage in the face of, facing these creatures of the night. And do you come up with character before story, or do you create a story that reveals a character? Which way do you come at that problem?
I always come up with a character first. And I do like these questionnaires to kind of like get to know the character. And I'm a role player, right? So sometimes I will make a stat sheet so I know what kind of skills they have and why they have them. I know what they're really good at and what they really suck at. So those are things as a GM that I love to exploit. So I feel like stories like this are more like role playing by myself. So I make a character and then I make a story that revolves around the character.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. That actually reminds me of, I think it's Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman wrote a series of books called the Dragonlance Chronicles. And they were essentially just the results of them playing D&D, like all the characters and the storylines. So role playing with yourself. I do that all the time, but I just don't tell anyone. It's embarrassing. But isn't that what writing dialogue is role playing with yourself?
Isn't it though? Yeah.
Having arguments with yourself. So another interesting point you brought up was the connection between magic and technology. It's this theme that I explored myself in the series of books I'm writing right now. And I always find that some people worry that it's you have to have some like incredible understanding of technology to do it. I think exactly the opposite. I think as soon as you possess the machinery can kind of do what you want. Did you feel any limitations in that kind of world building? Did you feel like it kind of shackled you, or did you feel like it was just free play area?
I love that it was just free play. I bank it on my own knowledge of technology. So what I know, Panda knows, and then some a little bit. My dad is a network engineer, so there are times where I can kind of like, rack his brain for inspiration regarding how she actually hacks things and how she actually exploits technology to her benefit.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you said earlier, but I missed it. What's the name of the actual book that Panda's excerpted from?
Hope's Chest. Hope's Chest is her. Hope's Chest is her SN. It's her screen name, so her handle. So boobs jokes galore. But her actual name is Pandora Tran. So she kind of like, a little bit of like wordplay referencing mythology.
Okay. Judges, do you have any questions for Sako?
Yeah, I do.
Oh boy.
I love, I follow Sako's channel all the time. And she's my queen witch, basically. And I love that. But it's the fact that the story, to me, it had so much, it was deep. It had so many layers. You could read it as an initial reader, reading a fantasy story with vampires, or you could see how much skill that Pandora had in witchcraft and moving about places and making herself invisible. So I want to know is, where did you get that? I mean, how do you make those layers in that story? It was just a short story, but I got all those layers. She was one, excuse my French, kick-ass bitch. I mean, she really was. She could kick someone's ass immediately. But how did I gather that within like 500 words? I knew she was going to kick those vampires all over the house. The only thing I would say is biometric key to a house. Why did losing the keys matter? That's the only one.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I got her. That character just sprang. And I thought, ooh, I like her.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, but I did. But how did you put that in so short a time? From the initial few lines of that story, and we're only paragraph and a half down. She's leaving the house. She's going to the party. She doesn't want to. But how did you get that character to be so kick-ass within so few words?
I feel like writing the book about her ahead of time, and I've got like a couple of short stories that I've written about her in the past. So I've got her pretty fleshed out, and I only reveal the parts in the story, in a short story, that the reader needs to know. And obviously, because it's first person, you only know what she knows.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to reveal all the things. However, there's no reason to belabor it.
Yeah, and that's the point. I think it's because you had those stories and the story before. She was a fully formed character in your mind that came across in the story, because we already knew, this author already knows what she's doing. This character's fully formed before she comes onto the page. And that was it. That's what grabbed me. Just immediately.
Interestingly enough, I do it exactly the opposite way.
Oh yeah.
I come up with a like a theme, and then I make the hero embody the theme and the villain embody the counter theme. And then I make them make choices, and as they make difficult choices, that tells me who they are. And then I kind of fill in the details about them later. And the reason I do that is because I want to make sure that when a story, stories are just change units. That's all they are. They're lessons about change. So I want to make sure that the change is my number one thing. I don't want to create a character in which I feel shackled by who or what I have a preconceived notion of what they are. If I think of a hero and I think a hero needs to have flaws, I create choices for them to screw up to show you who they are. And instead of writing a detailed character sheet out front, I do some of what you're talking about, Sako. I flesh them out, but first I need to know a couple of the choices they make that make this stuff important. And then I build the character around. I think of that as like the irritant that makes the pearl, is what bad choice did they make and what good choices do they make. And then I build the character around that. So I actually end up doing midway through the outline, I start fleshing out the characters like that, rather than,
Yeah, I understand that very well, in that change is extremely important in my stories. And because in Buddhism, it is through obstacles that we gain wisdom. So what's the worst possible thing that can happen? If I get stuck in a spot where I have no idea what to do, what's the worst possible thing that can happen? And that's how I move the story forward. And their reaction can be negative or positive, or I kind of like it when it's a negative one, because it's a chance for them to learn.
Yeah, I always think you can't give them any good choices, because easy choices are boring. So I always try to give them a bad choice.
It's never
best bad choice or an irreconcilable good, meaning either way is bad, either choice, or one choice might be good for someone, but it sucks for someone else. So by making sure that none of the choices are easy choices throughout the story, you kind of ensure A, that you're not boring, and B, that the choices reveal who the character is more than what they wear. Also, I thought, Colin was asking how you did it so quick. I thought that having her costume not show up gave us a chance before she was plunged into the action to kind of see how she reacts to things. And that seems like a small thing probably to a reader, but to a writer, I'm always looking for those things in the beginning of a scene to kind of just give us a little idea of who we're talking to, who the characters are in the scene. Well, great job.
I think Sako and Jasmine both did the same thing. When those characters were on stage, you were there with them. You just wanted them to win. And that was the entire point. And Jasmine Stanley, for goodness sake. But and the two of them climbing up, but Sako, yeah, absolutely. The minute you read those stories, you just thought, oh God, no, look at her, his house. She can't get vampires. They're just useless. But yeah, and I think that's what all three winners tonight have delivered, is characters you care about from the first moment you meet them.
Or that you hate.
Or that you love to hate.
No, I love them all. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions for Sako before we move on?
Bethany, come on.
I don't really have any questions so much like comments. I know your world is so complex, your setting and all of that, but it came through so clear in so few words, and I just want to commend you on that. Like, you mixed magic and technology and a party all at once, and it blended seamlessly. So I don't really have anything to say other than well done. That was one of the biggest sticking points for me.
Thank you.
Yay. All right, Chris Hewitt, you've been sitting quietly, waiting to impart your wisdom to the world, or at least to some of us.
We'll see how that works out.
So, Chris, I just wanted to thank you for straining relationships with my darling daughter forever. Chris wrote a story in which a little girl becomes incredibly creepy. And for anybody that watches my videos, you know that my darling daughter, Angelina, can be a little creepy sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, her self-imposed nickname is Psychotic Cinderella at the age of 13. And Jasmine, she is also a teenage authoress who is writing multiple stories.
Wonderful.
Love it.
I'm sure she'll look back on her Wattpad days and smile, assuming she knows what Wattpad is. But Chris wrote a story in which two of my favorite things, you know, my daughter and board games. We've had many amazing conversations over board games. And Chris took that wonderful jewel of my life and smashed it into glittering shards, scattered them across the carpet, and laughed at my distant picture.
Yeah. Sorry.
So, Chris, please tell us a little bit about your story. Guess Who?
So, yeah, I mean, this story came around from a writing prompt for an anthology that was scary games, whatever they are. And this was one of 3 stories. The other one was Play-Doh. You're glad you didn't read that one. And an Etch-a-Sketch that opens up a portal to hell. So, yeah, the Guess Who one is based on the board game Guess Who, if you haven't realised that. But when I was writing, there was a word limit of only 500 words. And when I was writing this one, it was clearly going to blow 500 words. There was no way I could make it. So it went on the back burner until I saw your video of here's a competition with your darling kids playing board games and all the board games behind you. And I thought, I got something on my Trello board, which is where I stuff all my story ideas. And so pulled it down and had a look at it and thought, okay, we can do this in the word limit. So, yeah, I guess it was deliberately written specifically for this competition based on the video that you did with all the board games, and I just happened to have an idea kicking around. So essentially what happens in the story is a psychologist called Susan is called to a secretive military base in the heartlands of the UK to interview a young girl. And then as the story unfolds, it becomes through the game Guess Who, we get to discover, or we don't, who the girl is at the end of it. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. It was.
So this story seemed custom designed to come to me because you had my degree's in psychology.
Oh, right.
I'm a military guy, and I've been in special operations community. And
so the bottom down bit kind of ticked the box as well.
And then the creepy little girl, I was like, what are you, is this targeted? Are you targeting me here with this story? But
it's certainly the case. I had a look. I had a look at what I had lying around, and there was this one story sitting around that seemed like the perfect fit. That said, the idea was there, but the problem was, and I had the idea that it was a little girl, because there's nothing creepier than a little girl in my mind. Have you ever seen, and you're actually in South Korea at the moment, if you watch a lot of South Korean horror films, they're always these little girls who do nothing. They just turn around, and it's terrifying. So that was already in my mind as like what would be sort of, the protagonist or antagonist rather of this story. And I went to write it, and then I realized I was shackled by the game Guess Who. So this story, if you actually read it, is a very difficult story to write if you want to stick to the rules of Guess Who. So I went to write it, and then my partner read it and said, well, that's just nonsense, because that's not what happens in Guess Who. You can't just drop these different character things down, because there's logic to it. And sure enough, I mean, I got 30 years in computer programming, and let's just say we were there with a spreadsheet for a number of hours. This story could only come out in a number of different ways if you sit down and do the logic around it. If you basically say you're going to have a psychologist who's a woman going in to interview a girl already slims it down to one character in the entire game of Guess Who. And then you've got to pick some other characters, and they almost select themselves. So this is the perfect example of a story that actually writes itself when it's purely written by a spreadsheet almost. Which also made it one of the more difficult things to write, because usually you just want to go and write something, and this was actually a complete nightmare. So yeah, it was a nightmare to write as well as to read.
So you have just revealed a major difference between you and me, and it is this. I would have said, now the game is called Guess Who I Am, and it does whatever I want it to do. Right cheating. At the end of the story.
That is cheating.
I would have never gone through all that trouble.
No, I think it's really down to the fact that I've got quite a technical background, and so is my partner. So it became a logic problem. It's like a Sudoku puzzle almost to actually get the right characters. Yeah, exactly. So the questions in it are not random. They're actually almost predestined, for want of a better description.
Some of the young writers I coach, they'll tell me they've got this complicated plot point and they're trying to figure it out, and they're kind of sorted out with everybody's motivations. They got to make all this stuff happen. And I go, which is the part you're tripping over? And they go, oh, it's this critical piece of gear or this piece of machinery. I go, take it out. That's what I would do. Like I'd always, but I can see how, like, there would never be Michael Crichton books if everybody thought the way I do, or there would never be Da Vinci Code, or, you know what I mean? Like, you can't, that's a certain way of writing that appeals to a lot of people, that they want it all to make perfect sense in terms of the technicality of things. I think that's a really unusual approach.
Well, I think it's an approach I would only take in this instance, and it was because there wasn't a game that had a set of rules, so the story really needed, I could, as you said, come up with a different game, but then I don't think it would have had the same impact, because people have played Guess Who. Almost everybody's played Guess Who. Any game
I've never heard of the game. I didn't know it was real.
Oh, what?
Are you kidding?
Oh,
well, now
man.
you need to go get Guess Who.
Never
send me the address I need to send a copy to, because then you can really freak yourself out.
No, I don't want it now, because Angie will want to play with me. So, look, I'm not kidding. I love building kind of, I call it crawling horror. I've written a lot of stories, and especially short stories, that kind of creep the reader towards some awful situations. And that's what Evil Grows in the Dark, my short story compilation, is all about. It's 4 stories like that, where I just drag you inexorably closer to the horrible thing. You had a really great sense of that in your story as they played the game, and the realization starts dawning on the psychologist that she ain't in Kansas anymore. And things have gone completely off the rails and outside of her area of expertise. And I also loved the fact that, because she's a psychologist, she thought she had an understanding of how to kind of pick the locks in this child's mind and get to a place where they could communicate. She found out she didn't, not only did she not know where to pick the locks, she didn't know where the door was. And not only that, it's not that kind of house. So does your spreadsheet help you create that kind of climbing tension, or was that something that's
no,
pure
so
writing?
If you like, the first draft I had that in it. It's just that the actions that build that tension had to change subtly. So the beats were there, but the beats had to change, So, for example, there's a piece where there's thuds at the door because the guys outside have hats. Let's just leave it at that. But that wasn't originally in my building tension beats. But it was easy enough to swap one building tension beat for another building tension beat that could match and keep within the rules of the game, if you like.
Okay. All right,
I should
that
have
makes
done
sense.
Monopoly.
So, no, nobody ever finishes that game.
I can't believe you've never played Guess Who.
I can't.
I've never played Guess Who.
Sorry. Ridiculous.
I'm a bumpkin. What do you want? What do you want? All right, judges, do you got any questions for Chris?
Bethany, it's over to you.
Not so much as like more of your process of, okay, you came into these stumbling blocks of this isn't working with this game, but I really want it to work with this game. For our younger and newer writers out there, like what made you say, no, I'm going to do the spreadsheet. I'm going to put in the work to get this payoff? Because I know so many people would just, pick a different game or just scrap it and start over. I just want to know, like, what about the story that made you put in the work of a spreadsheet type thing?
Yeah. I say it's not my normal way of working, and I don't think I would do it for any other story. I think in this instance, when I first wrote it, it was okay. I think mainly basically because I have a technical background, and the coder in me wanted like the logic problem of it. So that's to answer your question. I wouldn't have done it for any other reason other than my own technical amusement. As I say, it's very much like a Sudoku puzzle in that you can get, it's you can, it's the fun of the logic problem and solving it like any puzzle. It's literally like a puzzle.
Well, it paid off.
Yeah, absolutely, it paid off, Chris. And not only that, when I read it, I thought, ooh, I'm playing Guess Who. But when I saw that 6-year-old girl absolutely annihilate everybody in the room, and she's recognizing it by the minute as those people are going poof behind that screen, and I thought, oh, that's cool. But not only that, the language, the dialogue between the characters in it, and that one officer behind that screen who was almost human behind there before he goes bump and all that's left is the clothes. I thought fabulous. It was superb, and I've still remembered it from the day I remembered it way back, and I haven't read it again since yet. Didn't get a chance tonight. Any of the 3 stories, I remember them all, but fabulous, and it was obviously for me the winner.
See, all that logic. Spreadsheets is the way to go then.
Yeah.
I actually think that what puts
but Sako,
I think, Chris, what puts you over the top,
if I remember
correctly,
I need help. Please give me help. I'm writing a series.
I think what actually puts you over the top, Chris, is execution. You probably had the cleanest execution in the competition in terms of not just the story structure, the creative idea, but it was executed extremely clean. Tell us a little bit about your editing process. We know about your spreadsheets, so I mean, what do you do? What do you do on final drafts to polish? And this is a question I had for Colin in the last competition, because Colin's execution was incredibly clean and rhythmic and almost lyrical, right, in a very non-lyrical story. So what would you say? What do you attribute that clean execution and prose style to?
So the style is, I think I naturally have a style that's sort of very methodical, if you like. Anyway, I'm very succinct. You won't find too much purple prose in anything I write, that's for sure. And I think, again, that's my technical background. I tend to just write the actions of things that are happening at the cost of maybe a lot of detail, a lot of scenery, world building, etc. And it particularly works in short stories, obviously, where you don't have the time and space to do all of that world building, character building, or you've got to find cleverer ways of doing it as Sako did, where you're borrowing characters and you're kind of delivering already pre-baked ideas there. When it actually comes down to editing, I mean, just pass it through every single tool you can get your hand on and people. And so typically, I edit in Scrivener. I take it from Scrivener, dump it into Pro Writing Aid, take it from Pro Writing Aid, jump it into Word, then give it to someone else to read, and they'll find the real problems and go around that at least twice. And then it goes out. And if it goes into print on a page, then I'll find other problems. every single time.
So I don't think any of the stories were professionally edited in the competition. I don't think. I have an editor that I work with, and she just does copy and line for me. I don't do dev editing for my books. But I am constantly shocked. I'm pretty methodical too, brother. And I go through over and over again, and then I get the manuscript back going, man, this must have taken her 10 minutes. And then I open and go to the track changes page and just watch the unrelenting storm of red lines. And I'm like, what? How in the world could I have missed all of this?
Yeah.
And then there's very succinctly written little edits in the corner where she tells me like how I broke Chicago style, whatever edition, and it's a humbling experience editing work. And I'm getting through. I'm editing about 400,000 words of new fiction a year, so 450 or so, and it's just that you start to realize that the number it's an infinitely expanding math problem, right? You should like this analogy, Chris. So, in every word you write, there was an infinite number of almost possibilities for the next word, then the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. So your possibility for error grows at such a crazy rate that there's just no way anybody can get it all right. I still find some horrible, clunky sentences in some really highly produced, traditionally published stuff, and it constantly surprises me.
Yep.
Okay, we've talked about all the stories now. So what I want to do right now is talk about, this is my big question right now, is what do we do with all this stuff? How are you guys intending to pursue a career in writing? And the reason I want to bring this up is because everybody here has got, all of you guys at least, have the talent to pursue a career in writing. So where do you see your way forward? Let's just go around the horn, and judges, feel free to chime in if you want, but I'm going to start with the authors. Jasmine, where do you go from here?
Oh. Wow, that's a very loaded question. As far as what I'm hoping for, this is where I kind of get confused with myself of what to do with my life, with writing, because I know for a fact that I definitely want to publish my work. I don't know what order I want to publish my work is what I am considering. So I've written quite a few novels, just standalone novels, that are in first draft, that realistically, if I worked on them consistently, then I probably could get them out sooner, do debut novel stuff. Honestly, at the very beginning, I think that Amazon would be a good start, especially since I live in a very interesting place where indie authors or small businesses, they're kind of put on like a pedestal. So they really try super hard to get small businesses and like these new people trying to get these new ideas out there. So there are tons of different bookstores that I can talk to just within my area for starters. Obviously, I talked plenty about the trilogy that I'm working on. The only problem is I started working on this when I was 18. And so I finished all of it when I was about 20. It's not done. It's done. But the edits, I mean, nothing is edited. It's very sloppy. So it's definitely a bigger project. So that's what I bounce back and forth from. But I mean, like Amazon for right now, I think would be a good start. Rather than that, I don't have much of a plan. I know I need to think about more of a plan, but that's the very beginnings of it. Just don't edit at all.
I didn't.
Look.
That's officially the best comment of this live stream. I just want to give you credit, Aaron.
Please.
I don't edit my short stories.
I've read
And I think
so
it
many
shows.
of those.
Do you know how I edited this short story? So I did very light edits, right? So I asked my husband to read it. And he read it and he came back to me and said, I didn't like it. Like, what do you mean you didn't like it? He was like, there were so many things that needed to be edited. I'm like, okay, well then you should write down like the things that bothered you about it. And I guess like I could see if like it worked out good. I was laughing so hard at all of his edits just because of the comments he would make while he would edit. He would say in like caps, this doesn't make sense, change it. Or like, or he would also say another comment like in my dialogue, like he wouldn't say that to him. I don't like it, but he wouldn't go into detail about how.
That's helpful.
He is not a reader at
We
all.
still haven't had a Richard comment about pineapple on pizza or aluminum yet. Come on, get it in there.
But it honestly did help me because it made me think like, okay, well, why does he think that he wouldn't say it to him like that? Is it because they're not as close as I initially thought? Do I need to change the relationship a little bit to make it seem to make them seem closer? So it actually made me think rhetorically, and I think that's why the story did really well. Is because I had a really mean editor.
I love it. Love it.
But
So-
yeah, that's how that happened.
I just want to
So
say
that-
I've had the privilege of reading some of Jasmine's stuff, and it's amazing how different your two pieces were. Like I can see how I can see your skill developing and growing because your novel is very different than this. And then I got to read like the one about the reporter, that short story, and it was very different. And I'm just excited. The fact that you're working on multiple projects is exciting because your voice definitely changes with the projects. And I just wanted to like say I think that's pretty cool. That's about it.
You didn't realize that my voice changed.
Okay, gonna drag this topic back off of editing.
Okay.
Although it's kind of funny whenever I do these live streams with Bethany and we're talking to other people about their work, because Bethany is one of my main critique partners. She probably is my main critique partner, and she sends me stuff. And you said you had a mean editor. I think I am the worst. The way that I comment on stuff is because I do it like I comment on my own stuff. Like I write in the margins after I read my stuff, hey, dumbass, what the heck are you talking about here? And then, or I'll make fun of my dumb sentences. You know, it's like, and I don't realize I'm doing it, but I do that to other people. Like sometimes I have to reread the comments I've written to somebody. I'm like, gosh, I got to tone this crap down.
No, it's great. There's been like several times where you're like, scientifically, this is impossible. I didn't know we were reading a sci-fi here. It's like, okay, I get it. My goodness. No, but it's great. It's great when you have critique partners like that because it really does make you think.
It's
And it helps.
honesty.
It
That's
helps.
what you want. Critique partners must be honest. And tell
Okay.
you, if you're being a complete dickwad, they must tell you. Excuse me, ladies. Sorry.
Okay,
It's just me.
it's okay, man. No worries. Your color commentary for this one. All right. Chris, what's your way ahead for your writing career? Where do you see yourself in the near future?
Yeah, still trying to find my way through that. So I started writing a couple of years ago. Was the first story I wrote, and then I started doing a lot of the writing prompts that were on WordPress. You know, people similar to yourself, where they would just chuck, and I would just have a go at that. And then I kind of got into the sort of indie publisher scenes, particularly again horror seems to dominate that scene.
Yeah,
more than anything. So worked with continue to work with a number of indie publishers. basically, submitting to their anthologies, and then that's led to other opportunities where, they have ideas they want to run with, and they'll come to you if you've appeared in a number of their anthologies, i.e., you're a known writer who they can rely on to deliver something. So that's working out quite well at the moment. So at the moment, I'm still writing predominantly short stories. I've just written my first novella. I'm going to write another novella, the second part, essentially, of that novella this year. That's my goals for this year. And then I have 50,000 words of rubbish that I wrote on a NaNoWriMo a year and a half ago.
Don't we all?
And I picked it up in January, and I thought, I don't have the skills to write this right now. I love it, but I can't write it. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, is getting to a point where I can write it. But for me, the important thing, and why short stories are quite useful, is feedback. I mean, you just mentioned it yourself.
Yeah.
The most important thing is honest feedback. If it's good or if it's bad, that's more important than anything. And that's what I was finding in these, is setting up that cycle of, you didn't get into an anthology because you weren't good enough, and if the publisher, they'll be quite honest about, it was too much like something else, the style wasn't right, wasn't what we were looking for, etc. And that feedback's absolutely critical to being able to obviously make your changes in your own writing style. And that's where I am at the moment. I think probably with larger pieces, with novellas this year, and then I might have another look in January at that novel and go, now is the time to have a crack at it, because I'd like to see that one come to fruition. But I wouldn't be surprised if I'm still doing novellas next year and getting them actually out into the world, so to speak, i.e. published, rather than just diving into a novel for 18 months. And I guess the biggest part of it, the bit I guess we all hate, is the marketing side. You could have the best story in the world at the moment, but
nobody knows it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
So
amongst the 10 million voices all shouting that I've got the best thing ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say there's some bright spots to it, because just to tell you, Chris, I didn't market Evil Grows in the Dark at all, and probably by the end of the next week it'll be over 5,000 sales. So, and it's not from YouTube, it's not from anything. I honestly think it's just somebody shared it in the Facebook group.
Well,
you just don't know how it happens. My marketing plan was not to start marketing my books. Yeah, my plan was not to start marketing my books till next year. I just was going to get the whole series up there and then market the whole series. But if somebody likes it, tells a friend, they tell a friend, things can happen. You just can't count on that. But there is hope out there. Okay, Sako, tell us what your hopes, chests, and dreams are.
So I started out, Hope's Chest is actually under White Wolf's fan label, Dark Pack Publishing. So I have to sell it through their store, and I think I'm kind of hamstringing myself a little bit marketing wise by limiting myself to one store. So I'm this book that I'm doing with BC, we're doing it under the name Victoria von Rock. We are somewhere between looking for a small press to traditionally publish, because I just went to a writer's con, and I have the cards for 1 million publishing companies that are totally looking for work like mine. So I'm kind of just hoping to keep cranking out books. We have a sequel that is planned for the book that we're releasing in October. So I like the idea of just moving forward, and if I make money, great. But really, I'm writing for me. And if other people enjoy it, that's awesome. But I'm just making it available for people. And marketing is kind of a thing I do. So I'm just hoping that the schedule works out, that I can market aptly and succinctly, given the time frame that I've given myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's for me.
So, Colin Clark, I shudder to ask at this time of night, but tell us how your immediate future looks for writing.
Oh, quite crap, really. I mean, July was
I saw that coming.
Sorry, I just had to say it. I mean, July was a non-month. I wrote 8,000 words. But I did send Bethany my episode I read out on Barrett's channel this week for an episodic ghost hunters thing that I'm doing in Detroit, which is why I wanted to get in touch with Sako, because I need her help. Because it has witches and it has demons and it has lots of things in Detroit.
I'd love to help.
Yeah, in 2035, I need an American's help.
Detroit's
as we've
great.
already discovered, because I called it candy floss, and apparently it's cotton candy in America. But I have voodoo, 6'4" voodoo linebacker from a football club. I also have lots of things. I know I need Sako, but also I'm writing the middle grade, which I said to Kent earlier is not a middle grade. It's like It with Stephen King. It got too evil within the first chapter, with the kid being made to pee himself by being touched by this thing. So yeah, I'm doing quite well actually. I think by October I will have a first draft of this one, my steampunk one, and I'm thinking about the Chris now, thinking that I've got this story which is steampunk that I wasn't capable of writing, and I spent 18 months on that bugger. I'm not spending any more on it, but the Detroit one is a good one. And Sako, if you could help me, I'll be in touch, really, because if you need a witch to help you, and I am a kind of witch over here, but yeah, I need an American witch to help me.
Great.
Okay. Seems like another co-writing opportunity has just popped up for you there, Sako.
That's all I'm asking. Please help me.
Yeah.
Please help. A cry for help from Colin Clark this evening.
Help me.
I'll tell you a little bit about my future plans here. First of all, I'm going to do another short story competition because I love it. I get to read stories from all kinds of different people, and it's also kind of my way of, for once, not doing something incredibly selfish.
Can we
let other people's kind of let everybody else
enter
and try to bring as many other people's stories out into the world as I can, and encourage people to finish. One of the best pieces of feedback I get after these competitions is I haven't finished a story in years, and I did for this competition. And I feel like as soon as you start finishing your stories, it's like an incredibly positive avalanche of awesomeness in which you find that finishing is something that you can and will do always in the future. The next thing I'm going to do is I've been writing a lot of books. I think I'm up to, I really don't remember how many books I've written now. I think it's 13, and several hundred short stories. But these books are coming out. I'm republishing old stuff, not republishing, but self-publishing stuff that I wrote years ago. I'm rewriting. I'm writing 2 new series, one that should wrap up by the beginning of next year, the Millennium Tower series, urban fantasy, cops, demons, gangsters, and criminals, and other interesting people. Lots of shooting, death, magic. You'd love it. Anyway, and then next year, a contemporary sci-fi series called Charged. So I'm going to keep putting out books as fast as I can, but what I haven't done up to this point, which I mentioned before, is market anything at all other than just throw stuff up on YouTube, tell some friends. However, there you go. That's exactly hey, it's up there.
Yeah.
But what I was going to do this next year is actually create a marketing budget, and I'm going to be hitting 2 major platforms, Amazon ads and Facebook. I'm also looking into BookBub, but we'll see. However, I've tried to like prepare myself for absolute failure and like create a situation in which I spend a bunch of money and don't really sell that many books. And then don't get discouraged and continue on, which is, I feel like, kind of what everybody has to do when they first start learning these platforms and marketing on these platforms, because having lightning strike immediately is probably not very likely. So to all you other authors out here, I have one last question, which is, what is your drive and motivation to keep writing? I like what Sako said. I'm writing for me. If anybody else likes it, that's cool. Which is kind of what I say, because I was already writing these books. I wrote 10 books before I ever let anybody read any of my stuff.
Right.
So extrinsic motivation, or motivation from outside, is to sell books. And everybody say, you're so good. Feels good, doesn't it, guys? People are like, your story was great. Feels great. But like the intrinsic motivation to me is improvement. And I'm kind of let you guys kind of tell me what your intrinsic motivation is. For me, it's to create a process by which I know I can sit down and reliably come up with a story that works, that people can read from front to back, even if it's not their genre, that they can kind of go, okay, I want to see what happens next. And then kind of master that process. Because I write genre fiction. I'm not a literary guy. I don't try to be lyrical. I ain't writing War and Peace. I'm not Ernest Hemingway. I'm just trying to write cool books where cool stuff happens. It's exciting. And hopefully by the end, you feel like it was worth your time. So to me, the intrinsic motivation is to get so good at that. There's never a doubt that when I sit down that I won't put out something that people will want to read. Mm-hmm. What keeps you guys motivated?
Bethany.
I guess for
Mind
me,
blown. Jasmine's down there.
Wait, what? Go, Jasmine, go.
Go, Jasmine.
Questions. I love how you're asking all these questions, Kent. Like you can simply put it into one sentence, like, oh, this is what drives me. And I'm here just trying to search in my brain, like, why am I doing this? I'm just doing it. And I don't know how to explain it, Kent, but for, that magical feeling that you get when you read a book and you feel like you're there. Like you feel like you are just watching it happen around you. At least that's how I am. I'm very visual whenever I read a book. And I feel like I keep on chasing that feeling because I feel it 10 times more when I am creating something and I feel like I am a part of it. I feel like I can see it. So in a weird way, I do feel like it is kind of for me, but in another sense, my drive is I want people to feel this way. I want people to feel the way that I am feeling, and the way that I'm going to do that. I literally can't help myself. Like, even if I was like, all right, you know what, the writing thing is not working out, I'm closing shop, my brain wouldn't allow me to do that. It would just keep on coming up with more ideas until I'm overwhelmed and have to get something out of my head. So I don't know what exactly that is. Maybe passion. I don't know, but that's what keeps me going on keep on writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm better at writing my words than I am at explaining it. So when I talk, I say a lot more than I need to.
Talking is writing out loud.
There you go.
You just don't get to edit first.
I know.
I bet people wish they could edit me when I talk.
My dad taught me to think 3 times before I say anything. So, like, as a child, so I do my best to do that as I get older.
Anybody else have any words on intrinsic motivation? We got some questions from the audience we're going to go to here in a second.
Ooh, cool.
What motivates you, Chris Hewitt?
I guess very similar to what Jasmine was describing, and I think for me, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, and the point you were making earlier, you take one word and you put the next word next to it, and the next word next to it, and by the time you put 5 words together, you've got 100 different stories, and figuring out which of those is the best. It's quite addictive. It's quite rewarding to find the right combination of words and sentences and ideas and characters and whatever. So I think that's what. Yeah, there is an addictive element to just writing, I think. when you get stuck.
Bethany,
Well-
come on, Bethany. You must have something to say.
It would have well, hang on, Chris. It would have to be addictive for you to fill out that spreadsheet on that board game.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Story.
Exactly.
That is a sign of some kind of obsession or addiction right there, my friend.
That's
Trust me, I'm a psychologist.
commitment. Really is. Bethany.
Who else has got some
Votaw.
motivation? Who else?
Bethany Votaw.
Votaw. Yeah, no, I guess I never really said. I guess my goals as a writer and like making this a career is just putting out books and getting sales and being able to financially make it swing. But I have a deep love for short stories and flash fiction. And I think the like motivation behind that is I always want to make my readers feel something. And I've accomplished that with certain stories and whatnot, but there are things that people can only experience through lived experience and whatnot. And I want to give them as close of a lived experience as they can through fiction and even nonfiction with, you know, conversations I have with people. So like, that's one of my motivations is like, I want to make someone feel something, particularly with like short stories and flash fiction. For like my longer stuff and thrillers, I'm like, we're going to do a chase through Montana. Like, that's great. But my short stories, I'm talking short stories here. My main intrinsic goal is I want to make someone feel something, and I want to like finish a story and know like I touched someone in some way. So I guess that's my main thing. It feels really touchy-feely, and that, again, I have to preface, this is very much short stories and flash fiction. My other stuff, we got like helicopter chases and like all that other fun stuff. But
Helicopter chases make me feel things.
it's true. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So do vampires. Like I like that stuff. All right. So I got a question from the
I left my phone plugged in. Sorry. I'm going to ignore this call. It's from my daughter-in-law and my beloved Trixie, who are upstairs drinking madly. I'm ignoring.
All right. Colin's killing me tonight, man. All right, here we go. Check it out. So you all appear to be at different stages in your writing. How long have each of you been writing? I'll start. Since I could pick up a writing implement, I've been writing stories since I was a little kid. I started writing books about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago is when I started finishing things.
You were
And
a
I think
closet writer, right? You didn't tell anybody.
Yeah. So people closest to me, to include family, wife, didn't know that I wrote books, but I was quietly writing books behind the scenes and short stories. But when I started finishing is really when I consider the beginning to my writing career, which is about 10 years ago. I wrote a book called Children of Doom. It's my first novel, wrote it all the way to the end. And then I realized that I could do it and that I could write a whole book, and then it made at least some sort of sense. And that's when the Chris's addiction hit me, and I immediately, literally the same day, wrote another story called Lydia, which Bethany edited. And then literally the next day started another short story, which ended up being a novel later called Blind Spot. So like finishing was like the first pebble rolling down the hill that started an avalanche. And that avalanche never stopped since then, and it's just picked up speed. Okay, how long have you guys been writing? Go.
It took me 7 years to write Hope's Chest. It was a learning experience in that I had this story that I wanted to write. I had this prelude that I really wanted people to understand, both as players of World of Darkness and also those that aren't. And I want people to feel things. I feel like I kind of like skirt between horror and urban fantasy a little bit. And I'm trying to perfect dread when it comes to horror and not bank on gore or, anything like that. So I guess, I too have been writing stories since I was like 7 years old. But Hope's Chest was my first novel. and I went through 3 or 4 drafts of that, and I never stopped. So I was writing short stories in between there. I love writing stories for RPGs that I'm in, and I feel like writing helps me kind of learn more about myself as well. What's one place I would like to grow as a writer? Oh, geez. Plot. Rather than like cause and effect over and over and over again, I would like to get better at plot. And I have this like 30-day like plug and play template that I like to, like a what do we call it? A beat sheet that I use for novels. And I have a Pulp Fiction beat sheet that I used for the Halloween story. So I want to get to the point where I don't necessarily need the beat sheet in order to get a good plot out. I think that's where I'm at.
Who's next?
I'm trying to remember what the last question was. How long you been writing for?
How long have you been writing, and what is one place you'd like to grow as a writer?
Okay, so I was 9 years old when I first started writing things. I was very good at starting books, not very good at finishing them. It got to a point that I had this big binder when I was in middle school that I would collect all of my book ideas in. There were 34 tabs. All of them were very beginning plot things, which were never written, never finished. I'm pretty sure I still have that binder somewhere at my parents' house. I was never really a closeted writer. So to the point where all of my middle school friends, like I would bring the binder to school and all my friends in middle school would be like, what are you writing now? Like, what book are you writing and starting on? But I feel like they didn't really start, to be completed until I was about like at the end of high school. I did take a break writing from during high school just because I felt like I was too busy to write, and then I realized I just needed to give myself more time to write. As far as a place that I would like to grow as a writer, I think that I don't want to be known as the author that writes, I guess, like this certain genre of books. I really like diving into all sorts of different things. I've written romance novels, I've written mystery, thriller, dystopian, and I kind of just like putting my toes into all of them. So I guess that I would like to be considered somebody that could write any genre and is not like solely based on one genre. It's almost kind of like, to me, it's like the actors and the actresses that can play both the really good guy and like a super like good villain. I just feel like there's a lot of talent in that, and I think that's a place I'd like to get to.
Awesome. Chris, what do you got?
So I think I said earlier, 2 years I've been writing.
Yeah.
I mean, writing fiction. I was writing business plans before that, and most of those were fiction. But stuff that was actually fantasy, true fantasy. For the last couple of years. And in terms of growth, well, every in almost every direction. But I think the one for me at the moment is probably trying to find a voice which, in my mind, is a comfortable way of being able to write large volumes quickly, efficiently, that you're comfortable in your own writing. At the moment, I'll write a different short story in a different style, switching out how I write it, the perspectives, etc., and there's still trying to find the elements which I can borrow, which become the voice that I want to write novels with, if you like, see what I mean? Because you certainly don't want to get halfway through that and discover you don't like the voice you're using. So that's the one for me in terms of growing, is to settle, and that's just a question of keep writing, which is obviously the number one rule. Just keep writing.
Colin Clark, how long have you been writing, and what's an area you really want to grow in?
It's about 4, and unlike everybody here, I'm now 62, 63 next week, so I'll be old.
Woo!
Really, really old. But I've had to keep switching off because my granddaughter's now been running in. My daughter-in-law's just come home. My son has come in. So it's been really, really freaky for me. But yeah, I've been writing for many, many years. I love writing. Like Jasmine, however, a 62 Jasmine, I don't finish enough stuff. And what I would always say to everybody is one word of advice: finish it. Don't leave it. Don't leave it for later. Finish it. For goodness sake, if you got like me, I have at least 12 novels finished, but they're only at 64,000 words. Finish
There's
stuff.
so many good ideas that are just like in your head that you can't.
Yeah, and you just keep spinning them out. But nowadays, with Kent, who makes me feel like an amateur, the man's a machine. Bethany is my greatest critic, as is Kent. And when I write stuff now, I usually send them to Bethany, and then I send them to Kent, and I think, oh, that's not bad, actually. We're okay. But yeah, no, finish what you start.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
I love this
So
idea.
I really like this.
I love this idea.
I really like this next question because it assumes that anyone has ever
Barrett
mastered
again,
anything
isn't
about writing. I don't think anybody ever has.
I was about to say, I don't have any idea of what I would say to that. I'm like, I mastered? No.
So, but I'll attack it.
Setting.
I'll attack the question from a different direction. What do you think your strength is? So interesting what Sako was saying earlier about working on plot. I really don't like the word plot. I like story, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like quibbling about a detail, and it's probably not even worth the discussion. But the thing that I obsessed over in the beginning of my career was understanding the change dynamics in stories and what they have to do with human psychology. So one of the greatest and most misunderstood theories of how this works is the hero's journey. And the reason the hero's journey is super misunderstood is because people think it's an outlining methodology. It's not. It is a distillation of the reading of myths and stories, tens of thousands of them from around the world, and finding commonalities. So the hero's journey doesn't tell you what to write next. But what it does is it discovers the human experience of telling and listening to stories. And it gives us a lens to view it through that can help us understand it, so that then plotting becomes a lot easier to do. So that's one of the things I'm taking on myself right now is I'm rewriting the hero's journey. I'm doing my own version of it. And a friend's platform is going to put it up. And part of the reason is it needs to be updated because a lot of the concepts came out of a time where, let's just say, people's views on certain things were a little backward. So it needs to be updated. And I think that it needs to be told in different terms, because I read articles, people saying the hero's journey is dumb, and they'll use like the return with the elixir section. They say, in every story, there shouldn't be a triumphant return. I'm like, that's not what that means. Not even close. Not at all. And, you know, they see in Star Wars at the end, the guy stand up there with the medal and goes, that scene's not in my book. I'm like, that's not what it means. So what I'm going to try to do is to distill it down into 12 stages that make sense in terms of human psychology and why these things need to be in a story. Hopefully that'll help. People have been doing this for years. There's Save the Cat, the 15 beats, rising and falling action, the story circle. All of those things are just the hero's journey in different terms. So I'm going to try to put it in my own version of terminology. And the reason I want to do this is because I've spent a ridiculous amount of time reading Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and every other boring, dry, crusty piece of material on this that I could find on planet Earth. And I want to try to distill that into something that's really usable for writers so that they can reliably come up with a plot that works. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm sure going to try. Coming out next year. So that's what I think I've gotten good at that I can give back to other people, is how to tell stories that work on a psychological level without wading through the mystery of why is this middle part not work? Well, the middle part didn't work because your character didn't reach an all is lost moment and have to make a major change based off of the things that they learned. They didn't discover their own internal strength or didn't discover their own internal weakness. That has to be in there because we all struggle with that every day. Every single time we get out of bed, we go through this. We go through like struggling with our internal choices and weaknesses and strengths and how they play out differently in the world. That's why it has to be in your story. And that's what I think I've got that I can give back to the community. What do you guys got?
Just to like kind of piggyback off of that, like Kent is one of the best critique partners because you can send him a bare bones outline and he just has this way of like picking through and figuring out where the holes are. And so whenever that project comes out, I highly recommend it. So
yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking then of Elf, the movie. Look at him. He's on a bridge. It's his darkest moment, and there's a moment of death in that film. You look at it. He's still on that bridge. He's thinking of killing himself, and there's a moment of death. You always have to have that moment of death in anything that you have. It's got to be there. That's a hero's journey. Anybody who says the hero's journey is gone is an idiot, because the hero's journey is every story we've ever read from birth to death. It's there. It's that same thing. And that moment of death is the most important. So that's my take. All right.
I believe you.
I don't remember what questions we're trying to
Hello?
answer.
Anybody
I
there?
don't either.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, wait, I got
I
it.
feel like we've lost Jasmine.
I started writing when I was in college, and then I started mostly doing short stories when my my longer stuff didn't work. And to go back to Barrett's 2 questions, one area that I really want to grow is creating more compelling external conflict, because I really tend to focus on internal. So that's one place that I really want to grow. But one thing that I feel like I've not mastered, but it's such a niched area, is flash fiction. And I really want to like open the world to that type of writing to people. So I feel like that's something that I've gotten comfortable enough with to share the good and the bad drafts that I have to like help people out and reading them. And so if you have any questions, especially with flash fiction and short stories, I'd love to help you, because that's an area that I'm pretty passionate in. And I think I caught up.
Bethany Votaw, queen of flash fiction.
That's really exciting.
I'd never written any until Bethany got me to come on and write flash fiction.
Join the cult.
I love it. Because under 1,000 words, deliver a story. It's fabulous.
It's harder than it looks. That's all I know. Bethany got me started writing it too.
So much fun.
And because of Bethany, we started a series called Don't Drink and Live, which is kind of the evil, awkward brainchild of
Unfortunately,
Bethany
I'm
and I.
drinking and I'm live. Don't worry about it. I'm fine.
I have had some of my best and worst writing moments at Don't Drink and Live. I have literally written the fastest I've ever written in my life in Don't Drink and Live, and also the absolute slowest. I have come up with some of the best ideas I've ever come up with and gone absolutely nowhere, both in the same series. I got to do it again. That's where we write a piece of flash fiction. Jasmine, Sako, Chris, you're going to have to come join us sometime.
Please.
We write flash fiction live and read it to the audience.
Wow, yeah.
I love it.
And the whole drinking thing, you can drink water. You just got to have some sort of beverage.
Yeah, which
I'll have
I
to
just
drink
like the
Sounds
title,
good.
Don't Drink and Live. You don't have son to drink.
That is where the whole
Here you go.
Detroit ghost thing came from, was Don't Drink and Live. I was writing on there.
Yeah.
You remember the one with the troll at the door? It was about
I remember.
a witch killing somebody. That's where it came from. That's where the new episodic things come from. Is the don't drink and alive. And I wasn't even drinking that night.
Right. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to hop off. But thank you so much, Ken, for having me on this live. It was so good to meet all of you and hear about your stories. I definitely had Ken's website open, and I was kind of like reading the stories as we were going along. So they were all fantastic. Thank you guys so much, and have a good rest of the life.
Bye, Jasmine.
All right, thank you, Jasmine.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Right.
I think I don't know how much more this Colin's liver can take, so we're probably going to look at wrapping this up here pretty soon. Any final comments from our amazing authors and judges?
More in there.
Cheers, brother.
Hey, at least I don't get as loud as Adrian.
So once upon a time ago, when Vela was still in development, I wanted to release a Penny Dreadful, and which is basically flash fiction, episodic stuff, you know, about a vampire, basically. Sort of based on Varney the Vampire, which was.
I was going to say it's going to be Varney.
Yeah. It's not going to be Varney, but it's going to be it's going to be a callback, certainly, to that sort of story. I wrote 4 episodes and had 13 episodes actually like mapped out, and my computer died. And my backup died. And if it could die, it totally did, all about the same time. So now the idea of rewriting it all is quite daunting, which is, it'll be fine. I think the Don't Drinkin' Lives will kind of like help me get back into maybe rewriting some of this stuff.
Yeah, got to wait for Kent to do them. Kent, when's the next Don't Drinkin' Alive?
Well, how about next weekend? Assuming that the army doesn't drag me somewhere bizarre without telling me they're going to do it beforehand.
Yeah.
In which case, I'll just let Bethany host it.
Yeah, the kids are around.
Wouldn't be the same. I don't think it would work.
Nah.
It'll work.
Nah.
Okay. We're about to get to my favorite part. Does anybody else have any closing comments? I'm sorry, Chris, you didn't say anything.
No, on the master thing,
okay.
No.
We're about to get to my favorite part of the program, which is the green room, where we shut off the live stream and I get to talk to a bunch of amazing people and learn things about them. So thank you very much for joining us. These are the winners of the prize pursuing, emotion evoking, drama demolishing, simile scrambling, sinfully scintillating, awkwardly alliterating, trope torpedoing, terribly titled short story competition of doom.
Oh.
Please be ready to participate next year. Who knows? You may see one of these winners as a guest judge. So sharpen your pencils, get out those pens, fire up your laptops, and get ready to write. Till next time, butts in seats. Fingers on keyboard.
Yay!